Okay, so we'll pick this up on task 1B, which is the assembled orthographic. So as always, read this carefully. We've got produce an elevation, plan, and a stepped sectional end elevation of the assembled speaker casing. Must be a scale of 1 to 1. Show how the front casing and the speaker disc fit together, and how the back casing and the stabilizing rod fit together. So you'll note that we haven't been given a cut-and plane here. It tells us that we need to create a cut-and plane that will show these specific details. So what's important here is this bit about here, how the front casing and the speaker disc fit together, and how the back casing and the stabilizing rod fit together. So we need to make sure that when we draw a cut and plane, we cut through those two areas. It also says it should include an enlarged view to show how the front casing and the speaker disc fit together, and it probably makes sense to make that enlarged view based off of our section, because then it'll be clearer than showing it with hidden detail if it's about how two parts fit together, because usually that's showing an interface. So do not show hidden detail or add dimensions to assembled views, and that's an important point. So a lot of the time people will just kind of go in autopilot and they start adding dimensions and basically waste a ton of time on that. So you don't need to add dimensions. Do still need to add center lines and center marks though. So let's go and have a quick look. I've already made up my, I've used my drawing template. I'll just actually do save as so that I've got a copy of it. So we'll just call it speaker 1B. Right, good to go. Right, so our base view, we're looking for the assembly file there, and it's going to be in the same orientation as it's shown, I believe. I don't know that actually specifies the orientation, does it? Let's go back and just double check that. Plan step section assemble. No. Doesn't specify the orientation of it, but I would assume that we're going to do it with that being like the front face. That would seem sensible. Always, the elevation should be the front of the object. So if it doesn't specify, make that assumption. I'm sure you'll be safe. But if it does specify otherwise, do pay attention, particularly with some of these questions in later assignments. It's a bit tricky because it actually asks you to have a sectional elevation, and that means that you actually don't start your base view as the elevation. You start your base view as the plan. So you create your plan as your base view, and then you do your section off of your plan. So you don't actually do the elevation first. So just keep that in mind. Just watch out for those in the later assignments. So anyway, that's the object that we want. We wanted a scale of 1 to 1. I seem to recall that was what it said. It's scale 1 to 1. So that's fine. And just call this elevation. I've accidentally clicked and created another view there. It says you don't need hidden line. However, we will need to turn that on in a wee minute, and I'll explain why. But I'll leave it off for now. Okay, so we'll just create that. I didn't mean to create that view up there, so we'll just delete it. And actually, we'll just turn the visibility on. Okay, so that's our elevation. The other views that we needed, as it said, were elevation of plan, so we can project the plan. And we could have done this when we were creating the elevation in the first place, but there's no harm in doing it afterwards. And we'll just give that a title as well. There we go. And just have we think about our placement of those, because the sectional end elevation is going to sit here, so we don't want it too close to that. So we don't need to worry about leaving too much space around these because there's no dimensions to be added. Okay, pick that up. There we go. Right, so put on plan there. You don't need to put the view titles below. That's the way I've always done it. So, right. Anyway, the next thing that we need to do, as always, so we're going to create our title block first. We've done that. We're going to create our views and title them next. So we've got most of our views. We need to do the other end elevation, but it's a section view, and we need to do the enlargement. So we need the sectional end elevation to make the enlargement from. Now the section has to go through how the front yeah, the front casing and the speaker disc fit together. So that's basically how, like, this part here and that part there fit together. And also how the back casing and the stabilizing rod fit together. The problem that I have here is that when I go to create my section view, it's actually really hard to pick up the bars at the back here, like these guys here. It's really hard to pick them up on the view because we can't see them. And that's why, if we double click on that to open it back up, I would turn the hidden detail back on just so that you can do this, and then turn it off afterwards. So if I turn that hidden detail on, and I select this view, I should now be able to find at the bottom here, I can kind of pick up a point that's in the center of that where the stabilizer bar goes through, like these. I'll try and make sure that this is clear, like through the middle of where that is. Okay, so we want to find the center of that if we can, which is about there, just so happens to intersect with that point at the front here, and then project, or not project, but go up here so that we've got that projection line. I would bring my section, my cutting plane down here until it was coincident with the center of this. And that way we're showing how these two parts at the back here fit together. And then we're coming across here. So I'm going to click once to place the change in direction, and click again for my next change in direction, and then go down through here. Now, there's no specifics in the instructions about exactly where you need to do that cutting plane. So you could do it in other ways, and you could place that elsewhere. But at the moment, that cutting plane shows us how these two parts fit together. We can see that part and how it fits in there. And it also shows us how these two fit together. Okay, so it shows us the interface of that peg. That's the best way, I think. Well, that's an appropriate way to do it for this view. So we'll just extend that out a little bit. Extend that out a little bit, as we always do, to make sure they're not overlapping. And then all we really need to do now is the enlargement. So the enlarged detail view showing how the front casing and the speaker disc fit together. So if we do detail, front casing and speaker disc from here, we'll just select that area there. And the key thing is, because it says in enlargement, it has to be a larger scale. So 2:1 is fine. So we can place that up there. So all I'm going to do now is just update the names of these. I don't know if this is necessary, but let's use these terms. Enlargement C and section BB. Place our view titles wherever we want to have them. There we go. So no dimensions required. The only thing we need to do now is add our center lines and turn the hidden detail back off on this view. And you'll notice that that one changes too. If you're ever doing an assignment where you need to have the hidden detail in one of these views, like for example, if you've created a view and then projected a section from it, and for some reason this hidden detail shown up in the section, if you can't change that uniquely, you'll see that at the moment it says style from base, and that basically means the style, that is to hidden detail and so on, will be taken from the view that that was projected from. So if you want to make that have, for example, if I wanted the plan to have hidden detail, not the elevation, I could untick that, and that would allow me to change the plan without changing the elevation. We don't need to do that. It's just mention it because it's quite useful to know. So right click on this, automate center lines, tick, 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 tick. You still do, as I say, need to look over it, make sure that you haven't missed anything obvious. Like for example with this, the center lines aren't actually big enough, so I would probably, with this one, go back here to annotate, use the center mark tool, and use the largest circle. And that way your center mark will cut right through everything there. I mean, to be honest, there's so little in this, you probably could go through it and do it manually. But looking at it otherwise, there's no other center lines that you need. You could, I suppose, do a center line through the middle because it's a symmetrical component. I don't know that that's a necessity, but you could do that. And as I say, just go through these using your center line tool and tidying up or amending or improving the placement of the center lines as necessary. You'll see that's picked up all of these, as well as that one. I'd maybe stretch it a little bit further. I suppose you could drop center lines on these, or center marks. Not that I think that's really necessary, and also down the center of that. So we can do the center line bisector there. There we go. I think that's all the center marks we need. And then up here, again, center lines. And again, if we wanted to, if you wanted to show the symmetrical component, you could add your center line in there. But there's really not anything else that needs a center line there. So I think at that point, we've got all the views. Always go back and check. Got an elevation, got a plan, step section elevation. It does show how those two parts fit together and how those two parts fit together. The enlargement, that's probably the only thing actually we need to come back and add a center line maybe to this. So it'll be a center line bisector, this one here. And that, I think, is it. I don't think there's really anything else that we need to add here. Just double check. It's always easy to miss things when you're in a rush. I'm not seeing anything, no other features that I can see that are going to need any other center lines, center marks. So yeah, I think that's us. We're all good. That one's done. And then the next one, we'll just look at how to do the exploded isometric view. We've already made the exploded isometric as an IPN, but we'll make the view of that.